expert and
Recording in progress.
Sorry about
really
that.
just, it's okay. Just setting up the ability to get to the product. But I think that's what I saw when I rolled with
But
Daryl.
before
and,
they even
you know,
get to the house, what do they do?
they're the one of the things we changed was the setup call.
Ah,
You know,
thank
I wasn't personally doing that, but they really talked about the value of actually speaking to the customer, understanding what their needs were, and being prepared to walk in as the expert, you know, based on that setup call.
Exactly. Thank you for that. All right, so all these guys, I was expecting to hear all these silver bullet things, you know, like these magic tricks they were doing, like to land at, you know, $2 million. And basically it's fundamental stuff. And John Schnell, like one of our top DAs in the whole network, he went so far as to say that if he doesn't get a setup call, he's not even going to run the appointment. Now, that's a little extreme in my mind, but that's how passionate he is about the setup call. All right. So who's doing setup calls right now?
We're certainly trying, but they're hard to get a lot of times. A lot of times the people will only respond, it seems like, to text, or they have booked the appointment and it's hard to get any kind of confirmation, and to some degree.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you a follow-up question to that. When do you do your setup calls?
Usually we're trying them about 48 hours before the appointment.
Okay.
2 days.
When are you doing that? Like during the day?
Yeah. Sometime between 8 and 5:30. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody want to comment on?
I try to
I
try to do my setup call as soon, like if something's booked by a call center, or if Tia here in our office books something, I try to call as soon as it's booked, just because I know if they've called and booked, they might be available at that time, because I like to get that information about the whole scope of work, kind of, so I know once I get there, like, what am I walking into?
Yeah.
What kind of information do I need to bring to the table? Because I don't, you know, if I walk in there and have no idea what I'm looking at, like, I have no idea what to be prepared for.
So what kind of batting average do you have on getting a hold of people on setup calls? Like more than half the time, or less than half?
I'd say probably 65% of the time. If I try to do that, like I said, right after that booking comes in.
Okay. Well, there's your first pro tip, David.
Yeah, do it as soon as we see the appointment show up.
Yeah. With a 650 batting average, you're in the Hall of Fame, Clayton. Congratulations, man.
I'd say we're at 50% roughly. I'd say half the time we're getting to talk to the customer before we go into the house.
And the reason I say that is because, so I'm also a real estate agent, and that's one of the things that's preached is, if somebody calls or somebody wants information, you contact them immediately, because you contact somebody immediately, it shows them a source of urgency or sense of urgency that you are committed to what you're doing.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
The other piece of it I would add, and I'm with you, Clayton, as far as the timing goes. I'm not just trying to find out scope, but I'm also, that's my first chance to differentiate myself from the next guy. My goal is to start melting the shield of ice right then and there. And to start seeing me as a human being and a member of their neighborhood, if you will, before they see me as a sales guy. And if I do that well enough, and this has happened already, and I know I'm a noob, but we've been doing quite a bit of work. If I do that well enough and the next guy comes in either cold, or giving them the typical contractor approach, or giving them the cheesy sales approach, I've had people say, I just canceled that one. And that is the ultimate goal, right? We learned that in training. Get them to stop shopping. Get them to stop shopping, and ideally get them to cancel that other one or two guys that are also blowing them up from Angie. So that's my take on it. And I'm trying to get scope, you know, and because sometimes sometimes the Angie notes are way off. So you're looking at carpet for your basement. Well, no, I mentioned carpet for my basement, but we really want LVP for our family room. Oh, well, I'm glad I asked, so.
Hey, I can give a little, just a little snippet of that. And this just happened to me in the last 14 hours. So I just said that I do real estate. I've been talking with somebody here in Franklin, Tennessee, and been talking with them a little bit. And they told me last week they wanted me to list their house. It's a $1.2 million house. Well, yesterday she messages me and says, well, she goes, my husband had been talking to somebody else and he wants to use them. So, but my response, it wasn't anything, it was supportive. And I said, hey, I completely understand. I said, if for any reason you guys get a bad feeling, or if you just don't think it's a good fit, I said, just please keep me, in mind. In less than 12 hours, 14 hours later, she called me back and she goes, we talked to that other agent. She goes, we did a little research. We just don't think it's going to be a good fit. And, just talking with you, we want to use you. So that's how quick things can change too, by keeping top of mind and being supportive at the same time.
Absolutely.
And I would add that you can text people. Usually I'll call when you see the message come over, but if that doesn't work, I'll say, hey, Andrea, I just tried to call you. This is Tim with Floor Coverings. Just a couple questions before we meet tomorrow or whatever it is. And, I would say 6-7 times out of 10, I get a text back almost immediately. Yeah, call me in 20 minutes or something like that. So that's been helping me quite a bit because I noticed that in the beginning.
Yeah. And also, one final note is, you can't always do it at the same time. If somebody sets like a Tuesday evening appointment with you, it's best to call them in the evening probably, as opposed to like during the day. So change up your times as well if you're having problems getting a hold of people. But one thing that John Schnell said, I keep on referring to him because he was all over this setup call out in Cleveland, and he'll send a text, and he'll kind of personalize a little bit. Like he'll say stuff like, look, I know that you're getting hammered with calls right now, from Home Advisor, but I'm the guy who's actually coming out. I'm the local guy here. And, I would just like to talk to you about your project for a few minutes. Like, let me know when I can call you. I'll text him that. And then invariably he'll end up talking to the customer, just by explaining like who he is. Like, I think he starts it out by saying, I'm not a bot. I'm a real person. I'm the guy who's actually coming out to your home, blah, 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 blah. So
Can I'm going to jump in on this and share. I'm going to share my screen just real quickly, but I was having a discussion this morning, and we were talking about this very thing. And this is something that came across, and this is an example of a text. So bear with me while I do my share screen here. This is the example of a text. If you guys can see this, that somebody else is using, obviously unrelated, but they're really trying to make this personal. So if you don't get them on the phone the first time, this would be an example of how you could customize your text. And I'll just kind of scroll this up so you can read it. But, you would make this about you. So he's, you put a face with a name, right? So now, if you're going to follow up with another call, already they have an impression of you. You get really, really personal here about, put anything you want about your expertise, literally make yourself a human in the community, right? And so, and then, he chose to put some pictures of work just as a, highlight. But I recommend that, as part of your strategy, the setup call is so important. And if you're not going to be able to get to them initially, do something that makes it so effective that the probability of you getting them on your follow-up or the next phone call goes up exponentially. And at the very least, if they're going to be compelled to start communicating with you via text, at least to Dan's point earlier, you're already melting ice, right? You're already making this very customized. And so when you, again, assuming that the appointment goes forward, now they even have a visual of you so that when you show up there, there's already familiarity.
So he's sending the pictures and everything out, right? On his
Everything.
text?
Yeah. So however, he built this, my guess is he's got this sort of, built in a notes somewhere where you can copy and paste it quick. And then he probably has this, built in. So it's maybe one or two texts that come almost simultaneously. One's got the picture, one's got the messaging. And then naturally you're, going to be following up with the phone call because now you've sort of prepared them. Hey, I'm getting ready to call you. You might see a number you don't recognize, and it just makes it a lot more effective, I believe.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into the main event here today. Let me share screen. All right. We're gonna talk about the setup call and get in the objection today. We kind of transferred in with a little bit of setup call stuff, but I just want to dig into it a little bit more here. We've all seen the Inspired Sales Competency Assessment Tool, the ISCAT, the ISCAT. All right. Come on, that was a tough crowd here, Grant.
Yeah. Well, they're focused.
I refer to that.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
I refer to that as the PTSD document, Joe. Having been through it twice.
All right. So we all know this as a way to evaluate people in the sales process, but what you probably didn't think of, it's also a great cheat sheet. And take it from the best cheater on the planet, Tom Brady, who takes advantage of everything. Use it as a cheat sheet. So like when you're doing your setup calls, have your outline right in front of you. Use it as a guide. And hey, Roland, you're out there somewhere, right? I need a fellow Giants fan to, like my slide here or something. I don't know, but all right. So
as a Falcons fan, I like it a lot.
Oh yeah, that was brutal, by the way.
Still haven't gotten over it.
All right, so we're gonna break down the Inspired Sales Assessment Tool, the ISCAT. Y'all can see the screen, right? I can work from this, right? Oh yeah. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So
Crystal
this is it as
clear.
we know it. Yeah, this is it as we know it here. Okay, but in the evaluation here, like when you're scoring people, this is where the scores come from, basically. So what Arlen's trying to do is to get you guys to a 3 by the time you come to launch. Okay, so what that means is, you can explain why and when the process is done, and then the steps. They're functional, basically. You can do all the parts of the process, and you're competent at it. Okay, we're going to talk about ways like to get up there in the 4 and 5 range. Things you can do. Okay, and so when you look at the setup call part of the Inspired Sale Assessment Form here, there's a beginner level, intermediate, and advanced. And we're trying to get you to the intermediate level. And then as you go on, you want to get into the advanced stuff, but just the basics. Introduce yourself, the scope, confirming a date and time, and you're building excitement. That's probably one of the biggest aspects of this call. Like, you have to act like you basically won the lottery because you have this opportunity, like, to work on my floors. So you really got to sound pumped up for the whole endeavor. And then some of the intermediate stuff, like you want to find out, who referred them to you. Set expectations on the appointment. And like, what do we mean by the expectations of the appointment specifically? Anybody want to chime in on that?
I let them know that we'll be spending. I'm going to set aside about 2 hours of my time, just depending on how many samples that you want to take a look at. But I want to make sure that I'm available for any and all questions that you have during this process, since it is a construction process and we're going to be in your home for a little bit. I want to make sure to answer anything that may come through and make sure that you're taken care of. So they all appreciate that. They're like, okay, great. I had one guy that said, I'm going to set aside 2 hours, and I had a 9 o'clock appointment. He goes, oh, in that case, can you come over at 10? I was like, all right.
Has anyone
Strange,
had any problems with that area? Like where you say it's gonna take 90 minutes or so, or 2 hours, and the customer's like pushing back on you, asking you why and stuff like that?
I have had them say that long, and I said, well, I'm going to set that aside for myself, and it may not take that long. But yeah, I just want to be prepared to make sure that
Yeah.
you are fully aware of everything that we're going to talk about, and then they appreciate that. They're like, oh, that's great. Okay, no problem.
How does some of you like, you get around that, like on that time expectation? That's a big one to overcome. Is anybody have any experience with that on things they've done?
I've never had anybody be as hard on me as you role playing at your condo, because and I'm glad though, because you really do work us over pretty hard in that evaluation process. But I think the thing I like what David said, and it's the same thing I do, is you say, we set aside up to 2 hours just to make sure that you have enough time to see everything you need to see and fully understand the process. Rarely does it take that long. But I think that once, and then they'll come back. If it's what I'm trying to get to at that point is, if they say, well, I don't have 2 hours, I've got to be at work by, an hour later or whatever, that's fine. But if they're wishy-washy about that, then that tells me that, I go into it with a little different expectation. Yeah, they know that they told me basically I can be there for 2 hours, but they're really not excited for that to be the case. That helps me adjust my tempo when I get in there. It's kind of like working, as an Iowa guy working with East Coast guys like Roland or even you, Joe. You move at a little different pace, and you got to match that. You come in all folksy, gee, sure is nice to be in your house today. They're going to start breaking out in a rash, and they're going to want you to leave sooner than later. So I always try to match pitch and match pace as best I can. Even if I know they've got 2 hours, if they're more of a let's get to it, then I turn up the knob. I don't necessarily skip steps, but you change
Okay.
the pace, you change the tempo.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
We talk about price conditioning in the sales process, and then in the role plays, again, I don't know if you remember, but you've got to like time condition the customer for the appointment in a sense. One of the ways I like to do that is, I usually lead off with this question, introduce myself, of course, but like say, before we get into this, we're a referral-based company whom I have the pleasure of thanking for referring you to us. I kind of throw that question out there, and then and they'll say Google or whatever their answer is. And then I'll follow it up with, have you ever heard of us before? No, and everyone's going to say no. Okay. And then you say, well, let me tell you what it looks like when I come out there. I'm gonna roll up in my van. We're gonna walk the space together. I'm gonna tell you like a little bit about myself and the company. I'm gonna learn what your vision is. I'm actually gonna work up prices in the home and show you some samples. Like we're gonna go shopping as well. The whole process takes about 2 hours. So like you're kind of letting them know in advance everything that you're gonna do for them, and then throw the 2 hours out there. All of a sudden, it's kind of in context, and they might understand that it's 2 hours, as opposed to leading off with that 2 hours and having to justify it. You know what I'm saying? Just something to think about. I mean, like you can really you can time condition the customer as well as price condition at the same time. All right. So, what do you think the main goal of this setup call is? Why do we do it?
Try to get people to stop shopping.
Yeah.
Stop shopping? And how do you do that, David?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I try to stress is I make a big deal out of the fact that we show up with a van full of samples because we're, in our area at least, we're competing against a lot of other mobile people. 50 Floors, Empire, Footprints are all operating in that mobile space. But I of stuff to show you so that they know we're different, or that a full assortment is part of our arsenal. So I use that everywhere I can. But like I say, whether it's a text to them or whether it's the setup call, I'm stressing that we've got a complete shopping experience for you.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the main goal of this thing is really about you, the company, and the customer, and less about the project at this point. Like, you're trying to introduce yourself and floor coverings like to the customer, you know, and tell them, like David said, like what the experience is going to look like. And, you know, you're more or less like starting your warm up right here, you know, like with the customer. Someone said that earlier. Like, who said that earlier? That, I think that was you, Clayton, right? That your warm up starts with the setup call, in a sense. Somebody said
Yeah,
that.
building that initial rapport, just really, I mean, that initial phone call, just talking to them like a human, I guess. And then kind of getting into being more personal in that first phone call and just kind of getting some information.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the main goal here, is to start your warm up and build that rapport as much as you can on a phone call, but, you know, and hopefully stop the customer from shopping, like David said earlier. So who makes the setup calls in your business right now? Is it you, or is it office manager? Who's doing setup calls?
Office manager just setting the appointment. It's my responsibility as DA functionally to do the setup call.
All right, I like that one. How about you, Michael?
Yep, it's me.
Okay, yeah. Ideally, like whoever's running the appointment should be doing these calls. And Clayton, you're a design associate. It sounds like you're doing the setup calls as well, right? This Clayton. Any other DAs here?
Yes. I even, I mean, even in kind of, if she's already talked to them and set the appointment, I do still like to call myself and let them know who I am, and that, you know, I'm going to be the one that's going to be there.
Good. All right. So like we have the beginner and intermediate levels here. Now, some of these advanced things, you know, not really that hard to do. Is anyone doing like sending website links and reviews and before and after photos and stuff like that? Does anyone do anything like that after the setup call?
I haven't set that up yet. I know it's on my radar.
Yeah. Yeah, because
I
that's
do.
who does?
I
Yeah, you
do,
point-
Joe. So, yeah, so I have kind of like templates, and then it's me and my office manager. I try to get a hold of the leads as soon as it's on my calendar or as soon as it comes through on an email. So I have templates already set up to where, like, if I can't talk to them right then and there, I'll send a text and I'll have a link to the website. And it's already like stored in my phone, so I can just copy and paste, but I'll customize it based on who the customer is. And I'll put like their name and information.
Oh, nice. Are you finding has that been helpful for you?
That has been helpful for me.
So customers are actually looking at that stuff and seeing?
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, we're going to talk more about the Google reviews here towards the end. But one thing that we have against our competition are these reviews. And, you know, it's one of our strengths as a network. And you all are relatively new, like you might not have many reviews, but, you know, your market has reviews. You know, like in LA, there's all kinds of people there like with reviews that you could, you know, that's why you pay for a franchise. You can steal their reviews while you're building your own. You know what I'm saying? All right, so just something to think about there. All right, so any questions on the setup call here? I mean, I think we all know the importance of them, and it's often overlooked because, think about the customer's experience. Like when they go on Home Advisor and they're filling out, their form or whatever, they're getting bombarded with phone calls. Okay. So, it's hard to get in on those, as a customer. Like my dad was getting his roof done, and he innocently just went in and looked at pricing, and he got about 50 phone calls over the next 3 days. He was just getting crushed. And, so I basically told him he better answer because the customer's paying $200 for that. I mean, the business was paying $200, so we better answer the call. But that being said, so there's a lot of traffic going on, especially on these digital leads, which is where most of you are at right now at this stage of your business. So you've got to find a way to separate yourself, whether it be a text with your picture like Grant showed us, or the DA that explains he's the local guy and he's not a robot. You got to find a way in and somehow talk to that customer, set yourself apart. I can't emphasize enough how important this is. I haven't done a study like with setup calls, like the close rate ratio, but I think it's going to add 10 points to your close rate if you just do setup calls on simple math. All right, so one thing I want to mention here also on the setup call, it's not really a screening tool. Like some people use them as a screening tool where if it's a small job, they'll not go or something. Like you want to really make it about you and the customer, try and show up if you can, and make that appointment. But anybody have any questions on this, or have I droned on long enough about the setup call? All right. I'll take that as this is a tough crowd, Grant, I'm telling you right now. All right. Struggling here.
Not tough. They're just incredibly enthralled and focused on your unbelievable messaging.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about getting the objection. All right. Now, who's got a background in sales prior to this? Anybody on the call here?
It's the only background I have. I'm pretty much worthless at everything else. So,
All right. So let me ask you, on your previous sales processes, when did they train you to bring about the objection? In the beginning or the end or the middle?
and I like the way FCI taught us on this, but I have been taught similar things before during the discovery process. We used to refer to it as getting to know as quickly as possible, because what you're doing is you're shaping the way the conversation needs to proceed, should you be so fortunate for it to proceed. But it's also giving you the correct ammunition to bring in. So I try to do it right up front. I just had a call with last hour, and at the end, finally I got him to say, well, it really is all about price with us, and you just need to know that we're going to have 2 other guys in here getting numbers from them too. I said, hey, that's so glad you told me. Good to know. It's not a surprise. Looking forward to meeting you and your wife. But it shapes going in how I'm going to address that.
Yeah, I think Ashley, you raised your hand. What did you sell before this?
I sold medical devices.
All right, so what was your strategy as far as the objection? Like, what did they teach you to do? Like, get it early, or late in the process?
The objection, usually it was a little later than what FCI teaches us. I mean, I appreciate it was a little bit more of a complicated sale, I guess. So you kind of had to get through a lot of muck and different.
But medical devices are more complicated than floors. I mean, come on.
I mean, it's just a touch. You would hope so, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was usually kind of like, I would say, midway in the sales process, not as upfront as FCI teaches.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that a sales system is going to try and bring out that objection out of the gate in the warm up.
Yeah.
Okay, and why do you think we do it that way? Come on, somebody new. How
It-
about you, Roland?
Well,
What do you think we
you
do?
want to you want to disarm the customer, stop them from being defensive because they've already thrown out the defense. They're like, oh, okay, I told him no, and now we can just talk and just get it out.
Perfect answer. Yeah, I mean, it's really designed to take the stress off of the customer because the whole time you're there, they're stressing about, I'm not buying today. I'm getting other quotes, but this guy's he's gonna want me to, you know. So all that anxiety and then your anxiety as well, you know, with the customer. So it kind of it takes that out of the way in the beginning, and then you can just like get down to business after that, you know, and just talk to your customer because there's no more elephants in the room. You know what I'm saying? You know, so that's why we do it that way, just to get it out there. And then, you know, as someone said earlier, just to take your customer off the defense and then, you know, to start your process, you know. And so we have these questions here, you know, but who's actually going through this transition with the 3 questions? Everybody following that pretty much? I mean, it's kind of early in your career to be straying from the process, but dare I ask?
I've had to get I've had to get them to say, well, what made you decide to buy from me today? I've used that twice, and they're like, oh, you know what? No, yeah, we're just gonna. And I was like, oh, okay, well, great. We'll just take a look. This will be fun. That's what we're here to do.
Awesome.
And they're like, okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, so I'm glad you're sticking with that because so you might walk into a house and they might say, you know, hey, I'm not buying today. I'm getting other quotes. Like that might be their greeting to you. Has that ever happened to anybody where you walk in and they're immediately telling you that they're not buying from you today? I see a few nods out there. So if they say that, do you need to go through this 3-question progression at this point?
As long as you acknowledge it and say, oh,
Yeah.
well, that's perfect. We're here to make sure that you have all the information you need, and that's what my goal is.
Yeah, that's perfect. You don't need to go through this, you know, or if you're going in on like an insurance job, Portia, and there's a hole in the floor. Oh, how long have you been thinking about replacing your floors? I mean, like, you're not going to ask that question, right? You know, so you got to read the room on these questions. You know, it's not like you automatically say them, but if you get the whole goal of these questions is really bring about the objection. Okay, and if you get that in a different way, you're good to go. Like, don't feel obligated to stay on course if you've already got the result that you need. You know, everybody agree with that? Or all right. Okay, so somebody, I think it was you, Dan, that said something about customer personality and adjusting your tempo and things like that. You know, that really is a smart move. Like, you've got to, like, you know, play to your audience. You know, I'm going to keep saying read the room, but, like, you know, you really got to if somebody's from New Jersey, you're not gonna, maybe they don't want to do small talk. Am I right, Roland? You like small talk up there in Jersey? I'm trying to draw Roland out, Grant. It's just not working. It's like my 3rd attempt. I see him. All right. I'll try again
Roland's-
later.
Roland's kind of the oddbird. He's one of the few folks from New Jersey that I think actually does enjoy small talk. So, you know, I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah.
At least he fakes it pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Yeah, really. All right. So, and then another one of the advanced, you want to get engagement from all the stakeholders.
Thanks for not jumping in. My technology is not cooperating today. It keeps freezing on me.
Well, I posed a question to you, Roland. Like, do you enjoy small talk?
I mean, you have to learn to enjoy small talk if you're gonna. It's definitely there's definitely a whole segment of the Northeast, right, where they're like,
Yeah.
you know, time. If you ask people time or money, they'll take timing, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
it's definitely let's get it, you know, boom, boom, next, and you have to kind of slow the pace a little bit. But you know, if you do it, it's somewhere in between. I think who was it that said it before? Was it Dan who said before that You have to match kind of personality a little bit, right, in your tempo, but you can still slow down the whole process just a little bit, just enough to kind of, try and take charge of the direction.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Roland. All right, so Dan, what are some of the traits that you identify and how do you react? Like dig into that a little bit deeper.
I'm trying to figure out if they're scared of me first and foremost, and I say that because unless somebody's got like a renovation addiction, they don't have people like us in their house very often, right? It's intrusive. Even if they're looking forward to it, it's still an intrusion into their life. And I'm trying to assess their comfort level. I'm trying to assess whether they're more technically minded or emotional. An example, job that we sold and are almost done with the install, except for some trim pieces. He was a retired civil engineer, and he immediately came out of the gate with very technical questions. How do you calculate waste factor? He enjoyed that piece of it. So then I turned down the touchy-feely knob and I turned up the technical knowledge knob, and I met him where he lived. Now, on the flip side, another deal that sold recently, she's like, I don't understand this stuff. I just want my house to look beautiful. And I want to make sure that this goes well. Well, I turned down the technical knob and I turned up the touchy-feely, and it's an oversimplification. And I have to admit, it's probably more of an art than a science. But you can't come in talking to them like they're a retired civil engineer if they are a 65-year-old lifelong homemaker who has lots of antiques and wants a pretty house. Again, I don't know how actionable that is for other people, but we do it all the time. We do it when we go to parties. We do it when we go to wedding receptions and we're sitting by people we don't know. I hope you don't just barrage them with your default personality. Maybe you do. That's why you sit alone. But typically, whenever we engage in a conversation with somebody we don't know, we get a feel for how they communicate. We do that very naturally. And I think that if you do relax in the home and you're actively listening and actively observing, it'll just sort of happen. At least that's my experience.
Yep.
And I want to throw in something here too, is so if nobody's ever done one, or if they've never actually looked at them, one of the best things you can do is look at disc profiles. That will help you understand people a little bit better and how to deal with each one of them. Because there's some people that are going to want you to come in, they want you to do your job, and they want you out. And there's some people that are going to converse, and then there's people all in the middle. So it's a good thing to look at.
Absolutely. And that's like a graduate study for personality traits, Clayton. That's cerebral stuff there, the whole disc model there. I mean, that's good stuff. All right.
Super cool.
I got a hypothetical for the group here. Let's say during the warm-up you learn it's an Airbnb that, you're in the house, but the owner's going to use it as an Airbnb or a rental, or, what product are you going to show in your option one? Anybody? Bueller? Anyone?
PG3.
Who said
PG3 or 4?
PG3?
Me.
Okay, why would you do
PG3 or
PG3?
4?
All right.
Because now this is, unless I'm reversed, if I remember right, when we went through our training, that your option, you want to tier your options down. You want to start with your higher first, your mid second, and your lower last.
Okay. Hey, Grant, you want to chime in here, buddy? I know you're chomping at the bit on this one. Oh, we lost Grant? Damn. All right.
He's on mute. He's talking.
Okay.
All right, guys. Yeah, so let me chime in here. So we've been having a lot of discussion about this recently, for the very point and purpose of the end objective is to win the work. And we train you very intentionally about the process of bold, strong, broadest proposal first, having proper gapping between option 1, option 2, option 3. And that is always going to remain, the best method of training and learning this business. But you guys are far enough into your experiences now where you're going to need to marry the reality between the theory, right, and the foundational training that you've been provided, and don't deviate from the truth of that. The company story is critically important. We've talked about the importance of setup calls, follow up, personalizing your story. But you're far enough now with enough customer experiences that you also have to bring the practical, real market truth into your decision making and your strategies. And so at the end of the day, your objective every time that you walk into a home is to have the opportunity to win that work. So in this case, even though you're right, okay, Clayton, that's certainly the way that we've presented the approach. If you know in this set of circumstances that it's a Airbnb, that it's, something that is practical, that they're not going to personally live in, you may or may not even have the owner of the Airbnb present. It could be a property manager or somebody fulfilling a role. Knowing what I've just said, I'll give you a chance to either stand behind your initial thought or make an adjustment. If you knew those facts, and the end of the job, at the end of the day, is to get the work, what strategy would you employ?
So yes, so that was what I did say was wrong. So it's not a typical homeowner. So if it's gonna be Airbnb, I'm looking probably at a lower end LVP, something that's gonna be cheap to either replace or fix being damaged by multiple tenants.
Perfect. Now let's absorb why you changed your mind. You changed your mind because you probably know that your competition, whether you're keenly aware of who that is and you can even get it out of the customer, or just intuitively tells you that's what I'm going to be up against. So I need to come in and keep myself in the ball game and not eliminate myself with such an out of the blue quote in my first proposal that I eliminate myself psychologically in the mind of the customer, right? So the idea here is understand the facts, come in, get in the ball game, now build value. And even if you're $600 above, let's say, on a small job like that, you're going to win that work because of all the intrinsic value you bring in the differentiation. But it also presents another opportunity where you're almost going reverse direction. And that is, okay, in this case, here's the low bid. But I'll tell you what, you may be surprised to find that if we went up one level of quality, you're going to get, a little bit additional, wear layer. You're going to get a little quality here, maybe the warranties, and it's only going to be an additional $800. And all of a sudden you kind of create, a move up in your options in that way. So the objective here, guys, and let me be very clear about this. It is not to untrain the training that you've been provided. Please hear that first and hear that loud. Okay. Most of the time you want to put, the largest and you put your boldest, option first. But there are occasions where you don't want to disqualify yourself when you know intuitively you need to play it a different way. Win the job. Okay. Be smart, be tactical and strategic in balancing the theory, but also understanding the opportunity and win the work. Okay. And be smart about your approach, guard your margins, present your value, and know that you guys are going to outperform in terms of the way you deliver the experience and how you're going to install that work and the way you're going to care about your customer. Make sense?
Yeah. So you talked about reading the room, Dan, and if you're with a customer who just wants their floors covered, you've got to, you've got to be in that game. Okay. Not everybody cares about their floors. I hate to say it, but they take them for granted or whatever. So in the warm up, you've got to see who you're dealing with and game plan to that, and we were in Orlando and we actually did a drill where all the co-ops in Florida met in Orlando, and we rented 3 Airbnbs, and then each co-op would one of these Airbnbs and work up a quote, you know, and myself and Grant, like, we're in the homes as a property manager, you know, in the role play. So like, we didn't do the whole, all I did was really measure, but like, you know, who's heard the name Jeff Bell before? I mean, he's like the $9 million man, our biggest franchise by far. He does 9 million a year. Second place is like 3.5. Okay. Now, so he says his value is worth 10%. Now, so he knows his competition. He knows if somebody else is coming in there, and he more or less knows who, but between the warm up and the inspection, he finds out who, and he makes sure that he knows he can be competitive on, you know, a 12 mil instead of a 30 mil, you know, on LVP. You know, he's leading with that on those types of calls, and you know, he really beefs up the PGs in these later options, or on like repeat customers and referral calls. You know, he's more likely to show higher end product. But you know, on these home advisor leads where you're competing against, you know, 1 million people, you've got to be in the game. You know, you can't be throwing a PG4 and coming out $5,000 ahead of Empire, you know, who's coming in right behind you. And you know, yeah, you're good and you know, you're fun and you're nice and they like you, but they don't like you $5,000. I mean, you know, you got to be in the game. Okay, that's what Grant was saying too, and put your best foot forward on these types of. You'll know, your gut's going to tell you. Like sometimes, you know, who's had the feeling in their gut they're flipping a price for a PG4 and they know they're going to be way high? Who's had that feeling? All of us. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I would
Let
even
me
take it a
propose,
step.
let me propose a question if I could, because hopefully this will quantify it well. I'll just make an assumptive comment here, so please just, you know, take it in context. I'm assuming that every one of you, you know, and probably more than once, have had uneasiness or find it difficult to ask for the in-home close. Fair to say? Okay. And the root of that is that you're afraid of the reaction of the proposed price that you're going to turn around relative to perhaps who you're being compared to. That fair to say? It's probably not that fear to ask for the close in the home is not rooted in your personality. It's not rooted in probably the quality of the customer story that you delivered. It's certainly not rooted in your product spectrum of choice, right? You beat everybody in that. You know how well you're representing the brand and yourself. You know what a great job you would do given the yes to do the work. So your fear of asking for the close in the home is more than likely rooted in one thing, usually above all else. And that is, I've outpriced myself compared to the competition. So if you can have the empowerment and the awareness and reading each opportunity for what it is, so that you go and you build a proposal with option one that is going to keep you in the ball game right out of the gate, and that your fear should be, if nothing else, if I'm $600, or let's say I'm 10% higher than the other quote, you're still going to win that job because your value is worth 10%, kind of like Jeff Bell said. And you should have that knowledge and empowerment as well. You just don't want to be going into situations and defaulting to where you've outpriced your value by 40%. And now you're having to really work hard to get back down. Try to use the knowledge of all the information that you get from the very beginning of the setup call and all the way through the inspection and all the way through the whole journey that you're doing in the home. And you always want to be providing, you know, the best option possible. This is not to say that you still don't find opportunities to infuse scope into deals because you're the expert. Remember that you can spot scope opportunities that maybe they haven't thought about. And when you present it to them, you open up growth opportunities. You can spot the opportunity to present to them one notch up higher, you know, of quality for only X dollars that they probably perceived was out of reach, but you can show them why it's not. Or you can, you know, do the same thing where, you know, even if you've done all that and they still feel like it's a little bit much, then you have the ability through your next option to come down one more level and land the job. So the takeaway is to find the confidence in your hesitancy of why you have, you know, the fear of asking for the close in the home, and try to eliminate that by going in each time and narrowing that, knowing who your competition is. And it really is all knowing about your competition and realizing where you can make that initial turn and you haven't sort of outpaced your value. Does that all make sense? Did that help kind of put it in context? The fear of that asking for the close is always rooted in that one element. It's none of those other things. You guys have plenty of confidence in that. So figure out how to overcome that one. And I think that fear of asking for the close will, you know, rapidly start to not be probably an impediment that it is now, you know, you guys being whatever it is, 90, 120 days in, right? So.
Yeah, and all this is rooted in the setup call and the warm up. Like, you're trying to gauge your customer where they're at. I mean, it all happens in those first two steps, you know, and then you formulate, you know, once you know your customer, what's motivating them, you know, and plan accordingly, you know, and knowing your competition is the second level to that. You know, who's done a mystery shop in the market? Not everybody at once.
Portia, you did? What did you
Yeah.
learn about your mystery shop? I'd be really curious to know.
It was Empire. They just came in with just 3 selections, not what I wanted. He didn't really give too much information about the product. He came in and measured. He wasn't really personable.
So now that you have that insight, I can only imagine that it gives you that much more confidence to know that if that's what you're being compared against, right, in other customers' homes, so as long as you're not so far out of bounds price wise, you're going to win the vast majority of those comparisons.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in Orlando, the other side of this was we actually had mystery shops done in those Airbnbs. You know, we pretended like we owned them, and they came out there, and we compared our quotes to theirs, and our product offerings like to theirs, and you know, subfloor prep, all that stuff came into play. But like, you know, your competition is leading with 12 mil, you know, Stockman, you know what I'm saying? That's what they're leading with, you know, and we're leading with Lamberton and, you know, PG4 stuff, you know, artistry and all that stuff in an Airbnb. And this actually happened in Orlando, you know, seasoned franchise owners, you know, so when we are sticking, like, I'm going to use Stockman as an example, you know, when you can be competitive with Stockman and, you know, you'll be within, you know, 10%, as Jeff Bell says. He's got to get within 10% to win it. You know, he's worth 10% value on a given job. So to Grant's point, you really got to have the confidence that in the price you're flipping, like, you know, it's competitive. You've mystery shopped the competition, like, you know what they're going to do. So it's going to give you more confidence to flip that price and stand behind it. You know what I'm saying? Have confidence with it. So
Reinforce that.
Yeah.
That doesn't take away from when you're in, let's say, a different environment. Let's eliminate the Airbnb factor for a minute, and let's say you're in a very nice home, and let's say you're in, you know, the presence of a discerning customer, you know, somebody that really cares about quality, somebody really, you know, cares about detail. They're willing to invest, right? They're willing to spend to get that quality. So you've identified them as a PG3, PG4 type customer. Well, then, you know, operate accordingly, right? Then in those cases, be the expert and reinforce the fact that you recognize that they care deeply about the quality and the look and all the, you know, things that they're willing to invest in. And in those instances, you know, really do go kind of option one, you know, maybe to the, you know, the highest level, and then have the other options built down so that if they do object, you can say, well, listen, I clearly, you know, wanted to respect and demonstrate how much I understand that you care about your investment in your home, and then work it back from there, kind of in the classic training method. You know, so just understand that there are times and occasions for both, but I think the key message is make sure you guys feel empowered to take whichever approach is the right one for that particular situation. right? Like, don't be hamstrung that it always has to go one way or the other. Just really, really take advantage of your experience now that you've got enough of it in the market, right? When you didn't have it and it was only living in the training world, you know, you have to understand the roots and elements of that. But now that you've been out there and you guys have had enough reps, dig in and really, you know, utilize those reps to your advantage and don't feel trapped and hamstrung that it has to be one way. The one way is to make sure that you're in the ball game every time.
All right, so does anybody have Salesforce up on
I
the
do.
computer?
Yeah.
Can you share screen?
Yep.
I'm gonna show you. We have a line of products called competition crushers. Are you all familiar with that? All right, so if I go to your price list manager,
Yeah,
hit the drop down next to calendar.
I got it.
Oh, okay. We asked the right person here, Grant. Yeah.
Yeah, better him than me.
I go to like your catalog on, let's do vinyl. All right, let's filter, hit the filter. And then I think if you scroll down, it's like, one of them is gonna be competition crushers, maybe.
Yeah. I will say this about competition crushers from what we were told last time I was in Atlanta is that Sean really isn't curating this anymore. I don't know if that's changed, but I was told that it's not really being paid attention to the way it was pre-Sean. So
Yeah, and that might be true. And I'm kind of working off script now, which is something you're not supposed to do. But so are these the competition crushers? Like, did you filter those down?
I selected crushers. Maybe I want to do it this way. There we go.
Okay. So these are your competition crushers in vinyl. Okay. At least get to know these boards a little bit. Okay. You know, Stockman Plus is a really popular one, but there's other ones too. And you know, you're going to be competitive with these. Okay. That's what they're designed to do. And if you scroll right a little bit, it'll have wear layers on there and some specs. You know, maybe not that 6 mil, but you know, you've got there's some 12 mil there. And what are the prices of those? You have the cost?
Let me get rid of my filter. If I can. Oh, I got rid of all of it. Sorry about
That's
that.
okay. Just take a look at that after the call. You know, I go grab those boards and look at them. Look at the colors. Look at the, you know.
And what I do, as long as we're talking about this, you know, I'm up against, I don't expect anybody to know this, but Nebraska Furniture Mart, it's Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett enterprise. It's gigantic and it's literally across the street from us. So I've kind of had to take it upon myself to establish my own benchmarks for competition crushers, so to speak. And I think we all have to do that to a certain extent, and you'll do that naturally after you get beat on a few things and you find out that you're $3 higher on Core-Tech this or Core-Tech that. But I've had to go in and figure out what it takes to crush the competition. Like Stokeman, that's good stuff, especially since they extended the sale, you know, the discounts for us through most of the end of the year. And installers love that stuff. And it's proven to be very durable so far in the couple that we've done. I keep samples of it from overage here in my office, you know, and I'm
like big samples.
Oh yeah. And I'm scratch testing it against AHF's equivalent and that kind of thing. And it holds up really well.
All right. Yeah. So take a look at that because it'll help you with some of your offerings. All right. Let me get back to this real quick. All right. So we're going to finish with the reference list here. All right. You know, the often disrespected, forgotten, underappreciated, biggest closing tool that we have, the reference list. All right. So who's actually employing a reference list right now?
I'm just trying to build one.
Okay. We're going to help you with that. All right. What happens in the progression of this journey here? We're taught about the reference list early. Everyone thinks it's a great idea, but the fact of the matter is, when you start, you don't have any references. So you kind of get used to not having one, and then lo and behold, it's forgotten. Okay. And you're early enough right now where, I want to really emphasize how important this thing is as a closing tool. And, it's not in our network. I'm going to say we're lucky if 25% of the people are using some form of a reference list out there. Okay. So when Grant started, he went through the training and he kind of looked at this, and he has like a different angle on it that I'm gonna let him share with you. One of his favorite things to do is talk about his binder. So
some of you have seen the version of this. It sort of evolves a little bit, but for those of you who haven't, this is my review binder. All right, we're talking old school. So those of us that actually used to carry 3-ring binders as opposed to computers to school, we used to lug these around, and it was important for us. But to Joe's point, when in the absence of references, what is the single best and most powerful thing that you can gain from a great job done from a customer?
A reference.
A review.
A review.
A review.
Correct. Right. And you want to compile as many of those as you possibly can, because that becomes the most, tangible and powerful testament to the quality of work and the experience that you provide. And so first note is, in addition to your core KPIs, okay, that you measure all the time, your close rates, your job size, your RPPs, all these things, you need to include garnering and accumulating reviews as one of those KPIs. Make it as important as those other elements as you do jobs. Okay, make sure that it's a priority for you to accumulate these reviews. So this review binder is really built to fill that void in the time in the appointment where you are measuring and going to the van, and you've left the customer sitting back quietly, and you don't have a reference list for them to call, even though we've trained you that would be flawless, and you'll get those. But if you can leave this binder with them for that 10 or 15 minutes while you're out doing your work, it does two things. It fills that quiet time. It fills their minds and hearts and brains full of great things about you and your team, which is really good. And then naturally, it creates a perfect transition for you to walk back into the house and leverage this as the parlay into now going into the customer story, and then ultimately the shopping experience. Okay, so the idea is to literally just build this. I printed something out off the company story. Next slide is just, your basic "we're the stars of flooring" situation. So just customize this. All right, I just highlighted the fact that you got 400,000 customers across the network. Pick whatever you like, something that you feel is authentic to you. Here's where it starts to get important. This is your team. Okay, this is your picture as the owner. If you're the DA, your office manager, your production manager, your installers. Put pictures of your installers on here and highlight yourselves, and let that customer sit there quietly absorbing anybody that might be touching them through the experience of you're performing this job for them. This is who's going to be working with them. So really highlight the heck out of your team. This is the thing about making it personal. You are community members. All right. You live next to them, your neighbors. Behind that, highlight, if you will, everybody knows that network wide, you're 4.8 out of 5 stars. But if you guys are 5 out of 5 in your market, make sure you build a slide that says we're 5 out of 5 in our market, and put a QR code that can drive them to your website if that's what it takes. But just build something like that. This is just a transition slide that says we're excited about the work we work. Please take a minute, look at the reviews, and then print off the reviews offline, put them on here. Highlight it so they can read it, and then on the back, put photos before and after. And on the bottom, customize this. Put the subdivision, put the neighborhood, put the zip code. Allow them to see this review, see the before and after work, and see the fact that they probably this happened within a mile or 2 or 5 of their actual house, so that they can realize that this resonates with them locally. and then just put a whole bunch of these in here. Okay, now the reason that I have it in these, old fashioned kind of glossy things from Staples is you want to customize this in between appointments. If you just did a job in Watering Heights neighborhood and you have a review and you're going to appointment there, make sure you put that review in there. If you did a huge tile job 6 months before and you have a great review for a tile job and you're going to somebody who's interested in tile, put that review in there. You can swap those things in and out week to week, day to day, even in between appointments, so that when they're sitting there quietly looking at them, they're seeing something that's fresh and relevant. And you can leverage them the same way that we in theory teach you to use the reference list. If you say to them, hey, would you mind looking at this while I go out and measure and do my thing? And when I come back in, you say to them, just ask them something about it. What did you learn? Just anything, right? And if they give you an answer that says they looked at it, you say, you know what? Thank you for doing that, because I'm so proud of that. And just for taking 10 minutes for that, when we get to the end of this, I'm going to give you $100 discount just for looking at my review binder. Use it the same way, right? It's whatever you want to make of it. Ultimately, you want to have a drawer full of reviews that you're swapping in and out of this binder on a daily basis in between appointments and making it as relevant as you possibly can. And make sure that, within your branch, if you're the DA, make sure there's one of these in each one of your vans. If you're the owner, as you hire DAs, make sure you add one of these to your DA's van as soon as you have. All right. These should be something that you implement and you can customize it. This took me 30 minutes to build, some print screening, some color printer and some binder stuff. And you can make it really, really powerful. So do not discount how powerful those reviews are and how important they are. You guys know that intuitively. You care about it on your website. Find a way to bring it tangibly into the hands of your customers. It's the best possible thing, because all they're going to do is read good things about you while you're out preparing their proposal. And then at the end, if you get a yes, now you can say, I can't wait to have you in my binder going forward. I mean, what a great thing to be able to, on your final walkthrough, and you ask for that review and you say, I cannot wait to have you in my binder for my next appointment. Thank you so much for that. I'll look forward to you for your review. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to be able to see themselves in that, because clearly it meant something to them. So utilize it. Don't undervalue the power of something like this, because you guys work awfully damn hard to earn them. So put them to use when you get them.
One of the things that I was considering augmenting our reference documents with was relevant before and after photos. Like, for example, we're just finishing a project right now that involved a lot of concrete. It's a single level condo on slab that involved a ton of prep work, grinding, Ardex, etc. And I was sitting there with my phone at another one that we just sold that could be like that. And I wanted to show them the before and after. What are your guys' thoughts on, because it seems like we were sort of dissuaded from getting too specific with references, but I was thinking of having like job specific references where applicable, any thoughts on that from previous franchisees that have had success?
I got a comment on that. My philosophy on it is, it should be less about the job and more about the customer experience and what you bring to the table. So it's okay to have those pictures, but I wouldn't make them the star of the show. But I would definitely brag about it. But like, show the experience from your customers are actually talking like to your prospective customer in a sense through these reviews. So you want the main crux to be about customer experience. That's what the reviews are always about. Like sometimes like they'll mention the product, but 9 out of 10 reviews are about the experience they had.
Got it.
How you made them feel. So I would keep that as the main focus, but I would definitely layer that in.
Yeah, maybe have some of those at the back of the binder, or maybe even in a different binder that's more technically oriented.
Well, and on a really specific tough job, so let's just pretend for a minute, Dan, that one you're referencing with all the concrete, okay?
Yeah.
If you did such a great job and that person's willing to write you a review, okay? Then you can go one step further and say, would you allow me to get your name and phone number and put it on my review? And in the odd off case, we have somebody that wanted to call you as a reference, would you be willing to take 5 minutes and speak with them? And if they're willing, then on that particular one, include them down here as a reference,
Sure.
right? Especially if it's a unique job. And then you would make sure that if you're going to this next appointment that might be similar, you're darn sure going to make sure that that review is in your binder. And you might even go so far as to point that out to them when you come back in the house and say, you know, did you look at them? And you might say, yeah, actually, one of those reviews was a job that's very similar to what we're doing here. And, you know, if you'd like to speak with them, as a matter of fact, they actually have told me they'd be happy to do so. So you just pick your moment,
Sure.
right?
That makes
But
sense.
Joe, yeah.
Yep.
And unfortunately, you mentioned like you've had a string of insurance claims, like you could just go straight insurance claim, like review binder, you know what I'm saying? You know,
Mhm.
so all customers that I work with on insurance claims, you know, blah, 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 you know what I'm saying? You could really customize this thing. That's why the setup call, all this plays into the setup call. You're learning all this stuff, you know, and game planning for your appointment with the customer, you know, from the binder, from
Mhm.
how you're going to approach it. I mean, you were a professional athlete, like Grant, like, would you go into a game not having a sense of what your competition is going to try and do? Sort of like when the Giants took down the Patriots like twice in the Super Bowl, you know, right, Roland? I mean,
Joe was
obviously,
Joe was not the least bit interested in my answer. He just solely wanted to slide that in there. That's
no, I am actually. I mean, we're playing, you're in a very competitive environment, okay? You know, especially on these digital leads. I mean, you have to really, you can't walk in there blind. You've got to have a plan on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and why you're going to do it, you know?
yeah. Well, I think we're at the end here. You guys have been awesome. Listen, I hope we've instilled a few thinking points in here for you. I know a lot of this are things that you do know, but I think it's important that Joe and I are able to kind of bring you back out of the weeds and the firefight that you're in every